I think it's an interesting time, and like Ashish just said, it's a time where individuals need to demonstrate leadership, and it's no longer about all of us looking up to one great savior and saying, he or she is going to change my world or change my life. I like that old line: "If it is to be, it is up to me." And I think each of us has got to be reminding ourselves that if it is to be, it is up to me. So I think take charge. Don't look up to a leader and expect that the leader will have to do everything. And I think there's a flip side to it. Leaders need to recognize that they may not have all the answers. They are as unsure about what the future might have in store. And I think there are some things that good leaders can do to build confidence, to build that trust, and make sure that if there was a trust deficit between their teams and themselves, they can do things to actually bridge that. And I think I would probably think of 2 or 3 quick things that a leader would do. The first, I think, would be to communicate openly, to be transparent. A mistake that leaders can make at times like these is to say that, there is bad news and I'm not sure, so it's best to shut up and not try and share too much. I think it's a bad idea. Good leaders will be out there talking to their teams, sharing their vulnerabilities, talking about what's bothering them, talking about, the day-to-day challenges that they might be facing. I think become human, and your teams will start seeing you, I think, in better light. I also think that it's a great time for leaders to show kindness. There's this lovely story of something that happened to Jeff Bezos as a little kid. So story goes that he was in a car with his grandparents. His grandmother was smoking in the car, and he and his sister were sitting at the back. And Jeff Bezos, this bright kid, very good at mental math, he had read somewhere how every cigarette you smoke takes away like 5 minutes or 8 minutes of your life. And he's sitting there and calculating, what does this mean for my grandmother? And then, of course, Bezos has done that entire calculation, and he says, "Hey, grandma, do you realize that in the last, that you probably knocked off 9 years of your life?" And just as he thought his grandparents will say, "Wow, what a good, smart boy we have here," the grandmother starts to weep. And the grandfather stops the car, and she's obviously worried that her grandson is saying that she's lost 9 years of her life. And the grandfather then, gets Jeff Bezos to get down, looks him in the eye and tells him, "Jeff, one day you will realize that it's more difficult to be kind than it is to be clever." And I think that is something that we all need to recognize.
It is a time to be kind and not to be clever.
It is more difficult to be kind than it is to be clever. And I think most of us in our education system, we are all taught to be clever. We are all taught to be smarter than Guptaji's son. We are not taught to be kind. And I think this is a time when I think we all need to recognize that this is not about being smart. It's not only about being clever. It's also a great opportunity to show kindness. And I think if you look around, you'll see there are other people who probably got it a lot worse than you. Good time for leaders to show kindness as much as, they've been busy showing smartness. I think great advice from Aruna to start with, keep your friends close to you, but keep your enemies even closer. So if there are naysayers, if there are people who don't believe, I think you need to spend more time with them to try and get them around. I think I would probably say 2 other things. The first is to try and understand why are people the other way. One of the mistakes we can make is to label people very quickly. So it's easy to call someone who doesn't agree with you as stubborn, okay? And maybe you're being unfair to yourself in doing that. So maybe be careful. If someone is not quite playing ball, not falling in line, you might want to try and understand why is this happening rather than assume that the person is stubborn. So don't label, try and understand. I think a good idea to try and say, instead of saying you need to do what I want you to do, or you're not doing what I've asked you to do, try and say what's in it for them. I think someone said this, that the world's most popular radio station continues to be WII-FM, which is what's in it for me. And I think we've got to try and ask people, try and look at it and say, what's in it for them? How can I look at it from their point of view and try and get it right? In these times, the other thing I've noticed is that we are all very quick to attribute motives to people's behavior. If someone is doing it, he's doing it because he wants to show that he's boss, or he wants to show me that he can do his own thing. So we are quick to attribute motives. And I think we would all benefit if we were able to kind of take a pause and assume for a minute that it's happening because, maybe the person doesn't know better. Maybe the person has got it wrong. Rather than try and conclude that there is a motive to everything and it's being done because somebody has a point to prove. I think in essence, don't leave it to that person. I think take it on yourself to say if that person is not getting it, if the person is not falling in line, it's not her problem or his problem, it's my problem. And the minute you take ownership, I think you'll find solutions for it. I guess if you're looking for stories of hope and optimism and good news, I think you should share Prajakta's story. I think it's so cool to see this young girl doing cool work and making having a good time about it. So that's a great story in itself. I'll try and talk about a couple of stories that come to mind about this whole idea of hope and how do you keep this going. And maybe one of them actually is from cricket. And I want to take you back to what is called the greatest one-day game ever played. And this is a game played, I think, in 2006, South Africa versus Australia. Until then, the highest score in a one-day game was 396. And that was scored, I think, in 1996. No team had ever scored 400. So teams come close, but are seen as this big mental barrier that it's almost impossible for a team to score 400 in a 50-over game. And then in that game in Wanderers, Australia bats first and they go and hammer 434. So like all records broken, and the commentators and the media and the experts are all saying, what a poor performance by South Africa, terrible bowling. Clearly they've lost the game and they've got to pick themselves up for the next one. And, and everyone's celebrating this great record where 400 has been broken for the first time. And guess what happens? South Africa comes out to bat and beats Australia. They make 438 and they win that game. Okay. So in the same day, that record gets broken. Now that's a pretty well-known story that on the same day, two teams crossed 400. What is not as well known is what happened in the interval. So as the South African team is going back into the dressing room, shoulders drooping, and you can almost hear the commentators and the experts, the crowds are booing and saying,
it's never been done. They won't be able to do it.
Jacques Callis, who's just another team member, he gets in, wants to break the silence in the dressing room and he says, hey guys, I think they are 15 runs short. Okay. If they could score 434, he says, I think they're 15 runs short. If they could do it, we can do it too. And suddenly, the entire team starts to say, you know what, maybe that's true. If they scored 438, maybe they're 15 runs short. Maybe this is a 450 kind of wicket. And that one line actually got the entire team to start believing that, this is not over yet. If they could do it, we could do it too. And I think it's a great message for leaders. Never lose hope. I think keep that hope going. Things can look terrible. I think in the last few weeks, a lot of us have discovered a couple of things about ourselves. And those two would really be that how little we need. I think when you suddenly realize that Amazon won't deliver anything and the malls are shut and you can't buy yourself more clothes and you can't buy yourself another pair of shoes, you suddenly, I think all of us are discovering that we don't really need very much and we can be quite happy. The second thing we are discovering, I think, is what really matters in our life. This is a time when you probably start thinking back on people who might have made a difference to you, on those relationships, on that school teacher who mattered, that aunt who probably gave you some advice you never listened into. So I think it's a time when you figure out what really matters. And given these two, that most of us are figuring out what really matters in our lives, we are figuring out that we need very little. The prediction I want to make is that I think we will suddenly discover that more people are out there pursuing happiness rather than running some other race, rather than pursuing material stuff that might have mattered. So this whole idea of, and I love it. I think I love the story that Mr. Gurnani shared about how many of us, and I think we are all like him, we grew up thinking of that Mercedes Benz and thinking of that pajama traveling in the front of the plane. But I think you will find an entire generation now grows up saying, I don't think that matters, because you might have those, you might have the ability, but no one wants to fly anymore. No one wants to have a chauffeur in the car, perhaps, as you go ahead. So I think you will find more and more people wanting to pursue their dreams, wanting to chase happiness, wanting to be with their passion, rather than worry about material stuff. That's one prediction I'd like to make.